What's up, dudes? Max here, and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. There's something that always comes up in the topic of fighting games when you're talking to your friends, whether or not it's a brand new fighting game or one that's existed for quite a long time, and it's that of tiers. Who's top tier? Who's low tier? Who's middle tier? This conversation of tiers or who's the best in fighting games is pretty much commonplace with any conversation you might have. People want to know who's good, they want to know who's bad, and I'd like to take a moment to talk about this, talking about tiers in fighting games, these specific characters or some characters that can be lumped together that make you feel a certain way about how they perform or how you use that character. Which is why today on Real Talk, I want to clear some things up about tiers and what you should take with that information. Tiers in fighting games are important. It's good to know who's the best, who's the middle, and who's the worst, especially when it comes to higher level competition. And that phrase specifically is something that's really important when we're talking about tiers. The highest level of competition. Now, I'm not saying that everyone gets access to this, and even some top tier characters feel top tier in some regards, but really, when it comes to a tier list and how characters are regarded against other characters, you pretty much eliminate the element of mind games, and you have a character at their maximum potential, using all of the best strategies and tools available against another character with the exact same mentality, and that's how you develop a tier list. Usually tier lists go to upwards of 10 games. Let's just take, for example, Ken and Ryu in Street Fighter 4. This matchup might be a 6-4 in favor of Ryu. That means in a total of 10 games, Ryu is going to win about 6 matches and Ken's going to win about 4. A matchup like that, a 6-4, is actually really good. On any given day, on any given opportunity, one of those few matches could possibly be the character that might not be nearly as good as the other. You get some crazy matchups later on, like a 7-3 or an 8-2 in some regards, and then it gets really bad and you have a 9-1, which is where you have some very awkward design decisions when it comes to certain characters. These matchups exist in fighting games and they are absolutely relevant. But the thing is, when it comes to these matchups and how this information should actually be applied, it really shouldn't be applied to everyone. If you just jump into a fighting game and you're taking tier list information and you don't have that much experience, it literally means absolutely nothing. However, some characters do completely disregard this fact. There are some special moves within fighting games that are just so damn good you just don't know a way around it. And if you know how to abuse these strategies, then against your friends who don't know any better, it could seem like they're ridiculously good. There's about 3 examples I can take from kind of modern fighting games as example of this. One of them is absolutely Capcom vs SNK 2 Sagat. He has one specific move that kind of dominates the majority of the game and is extremely good, and it's his crouching heavy punch. There's also Superman in Injustice, and in the vanilla or the original version of the game before he was patched, his jumping eye lasers and his forward 2-3, the 2-hitting special move, were so fast you really had no idea what to do after it. A lot of the times they were safe, and that's one of the things you need to look out for these super top tier characters. These characters have strategies that cannot be punished, and you really can't do anything about it except respect it. Virgil's another excellent example with Helmbreaker. You really can't do much about it. There's maybe some strategies you can use to avoid it, but when it comes to these top tier strategies that aren't really hard to do, Superman, Sagat, and Virgil for example, it's up to you as a player to figure out what to do about them. And when it comes to a lot of the higher echelon players, the dudes that regularly figure out fighting games, they know these characters have these abilities, they respect them, and they find ways around them. Usually the best strategy is to never be in that situation where you can be put up against something like that. And it doesn't seem as bad as long as you know it's coming. But in the eyes of somebody that's just jumping in and you don't know what to do or what to counter, oh my god, these strategies seem ridiculous. There are a few characters that bend the rules, but for the most part, tier lists don't really mean that much to casual play in fighting games. Tier lists only really apply to this higher upper echelon, and when you have this higher upper echelon, yeah, over the span of many games, you're going to probably see a similar result, just because that's how things work out with some of these characters. But guys, seriously, that's a very, very, very few amount of people. If you're jumping into Street Fighter 4 and you're just playing for about a month and you start going to like tier list excuses as far as like a character being extremely good, I don't think that's exactly the mentality you should be taking. Even in situations like that, if you look at the tier list, you don't lose all the time. those few matches could absolutely be yours to win. And I guarantee you that if you're looking at a tier list for information, the Sagat that you're going up against is not a Sagat that's representative of maybe the 7-3 matchup or the 8-2 that you think that Sagat might win. That data does not apply to everyone. And if people know how to counter strategize with certain characters, then yes, different things can happen. You can get low tier characters that come out and do amazing things, which is why people just like watching the characters that don't do so well on tier lists, because nowadays tier lists are highly regarded, almost too much, because people immediately want to know who's the best for what game and what do they have to do to be good at this game. And it's a decent way to get in. If your interest is in just winning, then yeah, you might want to stick with that character the entire time. But my gosh, guys, the way tier lists are so religiously regarded nowadays, I think is kind of ridiculous. Play the game and figure things out. You might have a character that could get nerfed over a few versions, but it's pretty much up to you to learn to those bad matchups, especially if you're a character loyalist. But there's a good reason people immediately go to tier lists, and it's how we're initially constructed as humans. It's natural for us to go into a match, a fight, anything that's competitive, and you want to know your odds. You want to know your odds of winning or losing in any given situation. And a lot of the times when you lose against somebody that is using a higher tier character than you might have or you presume to have, then it feels really good. You feel like you have this inept, like, yeah, I did it. I took down the best in the game. Even though it's not representative the best in the game at all, it does feel good. Because like we said, a lot of the times, the people you're fighting aren't going to be the highest upper echelon of competition for that game. But it works the other way. Sometimes if you look for that character that's really good, you want those high-level strategies, you're instilled with this natural boost of confidence. You feel like you have whatever it takes to take somebody down that might throw something at your end. You feel like you have that character, but funny enough, it can also work against you later on if you start losing with that high-tier character. You can't immediately just pick up a character and expect to be absolutely amazing, just looking at what people do and expecting to X-copy exactly their strategies, their mindset, their move lists, and immediately become the upper echelon of competitive fighters. It doesn't work that way, guys. What you guys should really use is just tier lists as an informational reference. And right now, since tier lists are so important to so many people, especially within the competitive community for fighting games, you should take that information and use it to your best ability. I think the most important thing is getting into a fighting game and being comfortable, like trying to have fun with it, accepting that you're going to lose, accepting that you might take a few wins, and regardless of the character you're using, most of the time it's up to the player's skill. Player skill dominates character usage almost all the time. There's very few fighting games nowadays where one character just dominates the entire game, unless we're talking about like Virgil and Ultimate Marvel 3, but even in situations there are counter strategies beyond this stuff. It's not entirely about a tier list, guys. It's really about the players, the mind games, the setups, getting somebody into a situation that they've never seen before, being creative. And if you can be creative with those characters that people don't see all the time and then you go online, oh my gosh, you can be the famous player that does that stuff with that crazy dude that no one's ever seen. I'm not saying everyone should pick up low tier characters or mid tier characters. I'm just saying that you should play what you want to play. Take the information from that tier list. If you know a character's really good, find out what's really good about that character and find a way around it or find a way to avoid it. And if you have those characters that might not be as good, then find a way to exploit it. This really is the natural evolution of fighting games and how matchups evolve over time. But even with that information, like I just said, not all of you watching this are going to be able to take advantage of those situations and identify it. And for those guys that are just playing fighting games, please don't make a tier list the holy gospel as far as what's great in fighting games. I've seen a lot of dudes now that are just mashing buttons and going crazy, and they don't even care what they're doing, and they literally blame their opponent for using a top tier character. Dude, I'm sorry, it wasn't the character that lost, it was you. Thank you, dudes, very much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Real Talk, I appreciate a thumbs up or a comment below. And if you also like this one and want to see more, we have a Real Talk series that you can find in the playlist on the video right now. Thanks again for watching. My name is Maximilian, and I'll see you next time.